So, for today's episode, I'm inviting Gillian, who is also known by her creator handle Spritley, who is going to talk about her experience post-recovery off the back of a pretty gnarly blindside from her avoidant partner, what that experience has been like in terms of her recovery journey, how she's navigated the breakup, and how categorically this has not been like any other breakup she's experienced, and what that has meant for her in terms of navigating her experience of recovery, people's reactions to this experience, and how she's also transformed a lot of her pain into art in order to process this. So, without getting any further into this, because I'm super keen to jump straight into obviously talking about this, um, Gillian, lovely to have you on board. Would you like to share a bit about who you are and what you do?
Hey, thank you for having me here. I DM'd Ken a couple months ago, back when I guess the video was really going viral, closer to the beginning of the breakup period. And because I was just binge listening to your podcast, and they were such a comfort to me, and gave me so much insight into what happened. And so I'm excited to talk about that. And yeah, my name is Sprightly. I am a musician. I have been doing this cover series on social media for the past couple of years. And then while I was dating my ex, and we moved to Texas together to settle down closer to his family because that's what he wanted. And then 30 days after arrival, he handed me a note that said, "We're incompatible and have nothing in common, and I don't see a future together." Um, and so I just fell apart and went home to my mom's house in Florida for several months. Wrote a lot of songs, just kind of was a depressed mess, and eventually posted a video about it. That was the first thing I posted because I had this following from the cover series that I had, and I'd been very loud about how I'm moving to Texas with the love of my life. Um, and like posted DIY videos about the move and stuff. So I was like, how do I tell people that this all crashed and burned? So I posted that video. It went so crazy viral, which I mean, obviously no one's ever expecting that to happen. So that was amazing, and a little stressful. I got a lot of Instagram therapists' advice, and yeah, but it's also connected me with so many people who've been through nearly identical stories, which is just crazy. And like, you can see such a difference in comments between people who like, okay, clearly you don't get it, and some people who are just like, I get it. I've been there. And it's you can't imagine until it happens to you. And so now I'm here, and we're talking.
We're still talking about it, and but you know what? That's how it is, isn't it? Like, I mean, people think, oh, as you said when you were distinguishing between those who've been through it and those that haven't, you just get over it. You move on. You'll realize that, they weren't the love of your life and you'll find someone new. It's like, yeah, but there can be many parts of us that when they're in the thick of this don't feel that way. I remember when I watched that video that went viral, which I still occasionally rewatch because it's just so well put together. I remember when you saw the note that had been pressed in your lap, where you summarize basically it's saying, we're incompatible and we have nothing in common. Something inside of me just lurched out of me and was just feeling so angry on your behalf. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean we're incompatible? And I've heard that story play out so many times with other people that I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what this is. And even though we say attachment styles aren't a diagnosis, I will admit I was being a little bit armchair psychologist with you when I saw that because I was like, I almost bet $1 million this is an avoidant breakup. So
I mean, it's
that's
pretty obvious if someone does that to you. You gotta have some degree of avoidance.
100%. So, when it comes to you know, looking back on the experience, I guess my prediction turned out to be quite accurate because, as you confirmed with me later on, this was something you were navigating on as well too. And I think, one thing that we've talked a bit about before is like, and a lot of people talk about is like, where were the red flags? Like, did you not see them? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, because I think, it's one of those things where those red flags are damn innocuous and they're not obvious for a lot of people.
hmm Yeah, so something that I didn't talk about for a while because I was trying to keep the things I shared to being like my experience with heartbreak and not get into the all the details. And then as time has gone on, I'm like, I don't care. I don't know him. I don't know him like privacy or anything. It's my story and I'm allowed to tell my story the way I want. So, but something I haven't really talked about on social media yet was that we had had a big rough patch before this move. And sometimes when I begin telling people about this, the rough patch starts with like a breakup scare that he brought up. And I was like, whoa, 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 what's up? And then we did end up going to like couples therapy for a few months. And when I initially tell people this, like their knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, like, girl, how did you not see this coming? Like, red flags galore. Obviously, he doesn't want to be with you. But actually, this rough patch period, what it became this transformation growth as a couple journey from we're just a couple in our 20s like taking it day by day to looking at each other and the incompatibilities which at the time were framed as I wanted to live in LA and be a musician, he wanted to go back to Texas and live on a farm. And so we actually seriously sat down and talked about that, which earlier in our relationship we kind of just kicked that can down the road. We sat down and talked about it and made these future plans and went from, that young 20s relationship to, okay, I'm committing to you. I'm going to settle down with you. And then also, I mean, just like in therapy, we learned how to communicate so much better. And I felt by the end of it way more trusting and invested in the relationship and him than I ever had.
Yeah.
I felt like we had just, we had cracked into like a new level and so much work had to be done to repair the initial trust that had been broken when a first breakup was brought up in like December of 2023 or November of 2023. I did not take that lightly at all. It took a lot for me to then rebuild the trust and eventually agree to move to Texas with him. So that kind of summarizes that time period.
Yeah. And what I love about what you've shared is, there's so much to this. The initial breakup and everything that happened afterwards too, you took it seriously. It sounds like both of you really committed from the sounds of it of wanting to work on this. You did all the conventional things. You went to couples counseling or therapy. You really worked on your communication and sat down as a couple and were like, what do we want for our future? What does this look like? Very adult, mature sounding things. And, to the people out there who are saying, well, he just didn't really want you, it's like, well, no, it's not that simple as that. Like, if we look at this, you know, if we look at the forest, and now that we're no longer within the forest, so to speak, I don't know about you, but I could imagine, and this is me making an assumption, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I could imagine he was committed to this. Like it wouldn't have been a case of he was just faking it or he was just, not necessarily into you. I think a lot of people love these thought terminating cliches of they're just not that into you. If they wanted to, they would. It's like, no, this person's quite clearly committed to doing the work and wants to actually work on this. But I think what people miss, including those of us that are in it, are just how deep those anxieties run for our avoidant partners and how well masked they are, for want of a better word, that we don't often see them, and we often think, oh, that was the rough patch. It's done. It's over. We're not going to have to worry about this again. But it's so much more deep than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we talked about attachment styles in therapy. I mean, I didn't know, I wasn't an expert on it, but I read attached, I was very aware of it. And that whole time period, I thought that I was just anxious. And that was the problem. I knew that he was definitely on the avoidant end of things, but I thought that I was more anxious than he was avoidant. And looking back, I'm like, maybe I wasn't even anxious at all, and maybe my concerns were valid. So it was so hard at the time to see those as red flags when I also could have seen them as like, oh, I just need like coping techniques for my anxious attachment. But anyway, we did work on this in therapy and like he was aware of it, I was aware of it, and he did love me very much. Like we were extremely serious. We had such a deep bond. There was no one else. People speculate, was he cheating or there really, really wasn't. I swear, like there's no chance. Um, and he really wanted to work on it. He was aware of his like attachment issues. I was aware, and he like we seemingly worked through it, and he committed to me. And then I guess just got spooked and cut the cord
Yeah.
when we, yeah.
And isn't that scary to think that like that's an actual thing? Like, when people hear that, I don't know about you, but like when people hear so and so, my partner got spooked and they ran, people's immediate reaction to hearing that, if they haven't gone through this, is often to judge the person, being like, you're just telling yourself stories, or they're clearly just not that into you. When it's like, no, no, that's quite literally what happened. And it's hard for us, I think, ourselves in recovery to convince ourselves of what we're actually witnessing. And I think part of our healing journey, and I don't know if you found this too with like the art you've put out, the music you've put out, is contextualizing this experience based on what was going on, particularly emotionally as well too. Because I think a lot of us, can get into our heads being like, were they actually cheating? Was I just delusional this entire time? Were they, was this even real? But I think once those questions start to, be answered, the reality is that it's just sad. It's tragic because it sounds like a perfectly good relationship came undone, not because there were serious incompatibilities between you as a couple, but because if 85%, 90% even of this person was amazing, just that damn 10% that had all these attachment injuries just got in the way of it. And there was nothing anyone could have done to fix that unless they'd actually done the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were the happiest we had ever been,
Yeah.
like in a new honeymoon phase during this whole move and everything. Um, and I remember, so he went on this like family trip, and when he came back is when he broke up with me. But I remember driving him to the airport on the way there, and it occurred to me that it had been many months, maybe 2 or 3 months since our last like therapy appointment back in California, and things had just been going so well that like forgot to kind of like check in, and I was like, oh, I should do that, because relationships, you need to be proactive to take care of a relationship. And so I was like, oh, hey, like I almost forgot about this. I know nothing's wrong, but I just, how's everything going between you and I? Like, we good? Is there anything you want to bring up? And he didn't have much time because we were like approaching the airport, and he was like, oh, I'll think about it. And then I guess he thought about it, came back and handed me the note after being in such a happy period that we didn't even think to check in with each other for so long. So, it's such an abrupt departure from reality that makes it really hard to swallow, and um, adds another layer of trauma on top of like heartbreak. I think I do get a lot of people who are saying like, it's just a breakup, get over it. Like, why are you calling it trauma? It's not just the heartbreak. Like the heartbreak is bad. Like I missed him so much. I was broken. I was shattered. But there was this whole other layer of like, what I believe to be true about the world is not true.
Yes.
Something just got flipped overnight, and am I crazy? Am I having a psychotic break? Am I literally dreaming? Like I pinch myself many times. Like, is this a nightmare? Um, and yeah, it's just very challenging to navigate that.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because I think people don't actually appreciate it. Like, I've often gone on record saying, "Yeah, this is a form of PTSD." Like, there's the emotional flashbacks, and you may not have experienced any in all of these, but like, I know that a lot of people also experience a lot of rumination where they're thinking about their ex, particularly strongly of a morning and of an evening. They are just going over the facts, being like, what did I miss? What could I have done to have fixed this? Could I have said things differently? Could I have, using an example, could I have maybe had more check-ins with him to find out what was going on before the end of this experience? And the amount of self-blame that can happen for so many people as well, too, can be staggering. And then you have the roller coaster of emotions that happen where one minute you can be like explosively enraged at how they've done this to you and then be missing the heck out of them as well too the next. It's,
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but it's probably, I know, I'll speak for myself. It was the most emotionally difficult, probably the single most difficult thing I've ever gone through in my life. Like, I mean, I've gone through some tough things, but that took the cake. And I think that people who haven't been through it don't appreciate that it will forever change you and you will look at things very differently. And as you said, your perception of reality is just annihilated. And whoever, Sprightly was before this is not the version of who you are after it.
Yeah. That is definitely true. And it's going to be tough to like trust again. And yeah, I did not think that someone could love you so much and then just poof like that. Um, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And it goes against, I think, a lot of the things that we've thought about too. Like, I don't know about if you've grown up on a similar diet to me. Like, a lot of people have grown up on this idea that with love, we get close, we want to work on it. If we're boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever we may be engaging in as a couple, that we want to build this thing together and
Mhm.
love conquers fear, right? And it's like, no, not in this day and age. Unfortunately, fear conquers love. And the sad reality is that, even if that person loves you, if their survival parts, if their wounding gets in the way of it, they'll destroy it. And it's a scary reality because many of us don't actually appreciate how, our nervous system can jump in to destroy something so good. And it happens all the time, just people don't realize it.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked a bit when I first reached out about like the no contact thing. That's what
Mm.
that was like the first podcast I listened to of yours where you said you don't always recommend no contact, especially after a blindside breakup like this because of the whole like sanity shift, shock to your system and whatever. And I was not following no contact at all. Um, because I feel like and I don't want to sound self-important or like my heartbreak was worse than anyone else's. I'm sure it's not. Like I know that. I've read so many stories of people who've been through the same thing, but like I feel like it took me 3 to 4 months to get to the place that most people start when they have a breakup because I was just in such shock for so long. And, I'm also a particular person. I'm a very emotional person and a very impulsive person, so that doesn't help. But it wasn't a choice in at first. It wasn't like I could choose to be no contact because it would have controlled my entire life to spend all my time actively trying not to contact him. And so in order to like have any peace in my day, I just had to send the message so I could go do something else. Like it was out of my control. I don't know how much that has to do. Well, I guess because of the shock of it, it has to do with the avoidant attachment, but also my own impulsivity.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can really relate to that. Like, I mean, I think that when, we think of no contact and what it does for people too. Like, I know a lot of people give that advice out, and don't get me wrong, it has its place, but I think that when you've just gone through the shock, I don't know about you, but I remember you just don't have the bandwidth to go no contact because lest we forget, we're still very attached to that person. And
Mhm.
we're still trying to figure out what the F just happened in that experience. And so, I often find for a lot of people who've gone through this, you know, there's there's almost a degree of needing to understand and get closure off the back of what's happened. And I know a lot of people say things like, oh, well, closure comes from inside you, not in these cases. Yes, we do need to come up with a narrative that helps us understand what's happened, but usually we're left with minimal, jigsaw pieces that we need to create that closure for ourselves as well too. And often I've found for some people who are still engaging with, their avoidant partners post breakup, because they've taken the friend zone option, because they're, there's a boomeranging cycle happening, whatever's going on. The point is, if there's still interaction with this person and they have the knowledge of what's going on with the attachment issues, I often find people begin to get really kind of disgusted and grossed out by the behavior of their partner, and they get to a point where they're like, this isn't
Yeah.
attractive anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I needed to be like emotionally pummeled by him over and
Yeah.
over and over again through his dismissive and cold clinical responses when I was pouring my heart out in so much pain. And he would just give me like a dial tone kind of bland response. And I kind of needed that to happen so many times that I actually understood that this person is not the person I thought they were. Like I needed to see that change. Otherwise, I was just frozen in this like the only version of this man that I know is the one that loved me to death.
Yes.
And I'm somehow not with him and I don't understand why. But I it just like frozen in time and I needed that like shift where I was like, okay, no, you're an asshole. For me personally.
Yeah. Do you know what I love about what you said is it reminds me of that video you did of um, when you were talking about how you were reaching out to him and he'd say, "I'm sorry, but," and
Hmm.
I could tell how disappointed you were even from that video, but also just that's how it is, isn't it? Like you just get to a point where you're like, wow, this person just does not want to take any accountability or responsibility for what they've done, you know, and what they did it wasn't just a breakup. Like if it had just been a case of, listen, I think, we had some incompatibilities that were genuine. We discussed them since way back when, and we've hashed them out. No, this was an irrational decision where someone had pulled the plug and they hadn't respected the sovereignty, and the sanctity of the relationship. And just as you're getting settled in Texas, unfolding and getting your sofa set up, they pull the plug on you. Like, I mean, that's cruel. And it's such a jarring thing to have happen to you too, when all you've known before that is all the good stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, like he definitely has apologized. She said the words, I'm sorry, but like anyone can say I'm sorry to just hear something so curt and like rehearsed and bland in the face of what I was going through was just so devastating. And I kept thinking that maybe I could explain it to him differently and I would try to see things from his perspective. I would try to understand his avoidant attachment and understand that me sending him an emotional letter might be overwhelming him. So then I would try to like take all the emotion out of my communication and like still at the end of the day, it was just such a cold response. And it sucks because I spent 3.5 years with him and all that time I thought he was such a good man. And I don't know if I can say that anymore. It's like all this stuff was just revealed. Like they say you don't judge a person by how they treat their friends, judge them by how they treat their inferiors. Well, in a relationship, maybe you don't judge people by how things are in good times. You judge them by how things are in bad times. He treated me so well for so long until like push came to shove and he was in a stressful situation and then all that went out the window. And so it's hard to still see him in this like high moral great place when I know how dark it can get.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that is it's one of those things where you can hear a phrase like that, but to experience it yourself and really feel that, I think is an entirely different thing altogether. And so I think in that context, it's one of those things where going through the motions of him just being so emotionally shut down and not receiving it would have been very painful. Now, I remember when I was actually watching that video and then going through the comments, I saw a lot of people, frankly, I think, give very insensitive replies to what was going on. And I know some people were jumping in, well-intentioned, being like, you need to just get over this. You just need to basically see that you're just attached and you just can't help yourself. What was it like navigating that, particularly on a public platform? Because I think it can be hard enough when you're navigating it with friends and family who don't get it. But to have your story so prolific in public because of the success of the original video that we've just talked about, how has it been navigating that with the general wider audience of the world?
Honestly, I thought most of the negative comments were pretty funny on the original video because it was a 90-second video that like I had to simplify the story so much just so I could fit it in this like joke song format. So obviously, like when people would say like, "Wow, he didn't ask her to come to Texas, she just went," as if like the past year was squished into 90 seconds and like nothing beyond what I said in the video had occurred. Obviously, real life had so much more nuance and detail than what I could possibly fit in there. So I just thought it was funny that people like assumed that I just like showed up and said surprise. So I didn't like take any of that personally at all. Um, I did go like recently on another podcast called You Up by Betches and gave more of a detailed account of um this whole disaster. And there were a lot of comments on their Reddit page that were picking apart the story that were a bit more impactful, like because I had revealed more details, especially about the rough patch and whatever. Um, but I think like even when I'm talking to my sisters and my mom, people who have met him, people who've known me my entire life, it's still so impossible to explain because how do I fully explain the dynamic of our multi-year long relationship within like the context of like this entire conversation? It's impossible. Like no one can ever get it as much as you do. And so that's a little frustrating, but I'm confident in my perception of myself and my experience at this point, so it doesn't really get me too much.
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed because I was thinking to myself, wow, like I personally was reading some of those thinking, yuck, this is not particularly great because of just how invalidating some of these comments are. But in putting that to one side, I'm impressed with how you've navigated it because, you know, it's a really traumatic event that people go through. And I think validation is such a form of medicine for people who've been through it. And it seems like, in contrast to the people who were basically attacking the story that they heard, it seems though those that really understood it were very comforting in response as well. I could imagine that, having people who could really see what was going on and be like, girl, we know exactly what you've been through, that would have been very comforting.
Yeah, I mean the only reason, I mean I had to as I said, I had like this following and I had talked about moving to Texas, so I did have to kind of explain that okay, I'm not in Texas anymore and here's why. But beyond that, like my motivation to keep on posting and sharing was because I was just in such a bad place and I wanted answers from him. I wanted a response from him and he was not engaging with me in any meaningful way. And so like I had all these feelings and this person who is like the cause of all the feelings and the closest person to me in the world is refusing to see them. So being able to share them like publicly was my like next option. And I'm, I'm a performer. It feels natural to me. It was very expressive and it was also like taking back my own story and finding like empowerment and like art through it. But yeah, no, I'm so lucky that I had that. And obviously most people going through a breakup don't suddenly have an army of supporters like telling them like we're here to see you cry, you're doing a great job, which I'm just incredibly lucky to have stumbled into that. But also, other people connecting with each other in comments and stuff like it's more people understand than you think. It just you might not stumble into them in real life all the time.
Yeah, 100 billion percent. And I think that's where we find our safety in our community off the back of this too, because a lot of survivors who've been through this get it quite intimately and they're like, oh yeah, I see exactly what you've been through. And they won't judge you for what you've gone through as well too. In fact, one thing I've loved about, vicariously watching some of the content you've created ever since that viral video has been the ways you've navigated, some very, you know, big emotions that have come up off the back of that as well too, and transform that into art. One thing I often tell people if they ever feel called to it is, some of them will say, oh, I want to write a book on this, or I want to write something, or I want to do something about this. I want to convert this pain into something passionate that can inspire people. And I have to say, as an audience member, I've been really wowed by the vulnerability and the authenticity of what you've put out there. Because even on some videos where you've really just let yourself get into your feels, it just feels so raw. And I think that it really explores like the full dimensionality of these breakups. How has it been for you, just like leaning into that and just being like, you know what, I'm gonna convert this extreme emotion that I'm feeling, into something that I actually find kind of artistic.
It's been awesome, honestly.
Mm.
I I'm an open book. I love to spill all my secrets. Um, that's just who I am. And like there have been definitely some comments that are like, wow, so like when you cry, do you like set up a tripod and like take multiple takes? And I used to be the person that would think that. Like I totally understand why people comment that. But then I just found myself in this place where I'm crying like 24/7. It's all the time. And being able to like make a video out of it did like remove me from the bottom of the depression. Like at least I was doing something instead of just like laying around, and being able to do something as silly as just like edit the little clips together feels like taking some power back or taking some ownership back. I mean, that's definitely how I feel about no, I guess about it all. Like about writing songs and even about yeah, like making videos online. I know that like making music is much more highbrow art, and um like writing a song about it lets me turn the depths of the pain into something beautiful that I own and he doesn't own. But also like same thing about just venting online and being able to tell the story and get validation from it. Like I would encourage other people to share their stories. Like the amount of people who were aghast at me crying or still being upset after a couple months and telling me like some things are meant to be experienced in private, I think is proof that maybe less people should experience these things in private because everyone thinks it's so out there, but clearly a lot of people feel the same way. So we shouldn't be ashamed of that, and you might find more support than you think you will.
That's a really beautiful way of putting it, isn't it? Because, it's so interesting. You've got me thinking about this now as well, too. As a counselor, I try not to put my own personal stuff out there, but one thing I often find quite cathartic at times is when I like when I'm reading letters of people's experiences and accounts, I will get quite heated. And I find like that's my way of just like launching in and really allowing myself to feel into the emotions of this sort of stuff too, and beyond, the letter writer's side, if you will. And I think that even just displaying that raw emotion can obviously, I know it can be very frightening for some people who aren't used to those expressions of emotion. They often think, oh, wow, you're clearly angry. It's like, yes, I am angry and I'm allowed to be angry. Maybe you
Yeah.
should consider why you don't feel like you can be angry as well, too. And I think it's different from
Mm-hmm.
like rage, for instance, but without getting into like the delineations of different emotional expressions, what I love about what you said was giving yourself permission to just be publicly upset about this. I think there's a difference between like when someone is trauma dumping for the sake of trauma dumping to try and create an artificial bond with people as well too, versus,
Mm-hmm.
what I feel like you've been doing, which is I'm just going to do this because, like, to me, what I've interpreted from this, and I could be wrong, is the way I saw you were doing it was just like, I feel like just exploring this emotion through this music. I'm just going to go there because I want to do this for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the same motivation as making a song out of it.
Yeah.
Like I've got video editing has become a part of my life in the past like couple years, and this is the first time that it's kind of gone down this road into personal stuff. But also, I mean, so much of it was driven by him being so avoidant. If he hadn't been so avoidant, even if it had been as devastating of a breakup, if he hadn't just totally cut me out, I wouldn't have felt this need to like scream it from the rooftops, you know? Like, you're not hearing me. Someone's got to hear me.
Yeah. Do you know, as you were saying that, I was actually thinking back to that cover you did of Sabrina Carpenter's Please, Please, Please. And I've actually got that saved on my Spotify because I actually prefer it to the original. The original one, to be honest, is
Thank you.
like it's all right. Like I'm like, like I've heard better. But the minute you turned it into that, rock
My
punk
Chemical
stuff.
Romance.
Yeah, My Chemical Romance. I was like, oh my God, I'm right there with you when you were like screaming for the top of your lungs, please, please, please. I was like, yeah, girl, I feel exactly where you're at. This is so cathartic to listen to. I was listening to that at the gym when I was walking. I was like, this is just
God.
so good. And I'm wondering, if that's an example of like, something that really allowed you to like take that rage of like, I'm not being seen, I'm not being heard. I need to just belt this from the rooftops.
Yeah. Yeah, I could only stomach listening to My Chemical Romance for like a solid 4 months after the breakup. I don't know why. I hated all other music. I couldn't listen to my audiobooks, but somehow My Chemical Romance just cut through and did the job. I don't know. But yeah, that's definitely the route that my current music has turned more in that direction. I released a song recently called Before I Fall Apart. That's definitely more of that, but also more a little more feminine and ballady and stuff. And yeah, it's been great to be able to release those. And he just wants the story to go away. And it's funny that the more that he tried to ignore it, the bigger the flame grew.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people have resonated so much with my story, because so many people haven't had like this sense of redemption and like justice, and like their flame just got snuffed out and there's nothing they could do about it, but he just ignored me and didn't want to see my pain or anything like that, and the flame just got louder and brighter until he can't ignore it. Even though I don't, we're not in contact or anything like that, but it has been, of all the ways this could have gone, this has been incredibly great for me. I don't know how much other people can relate listening to this podcast, because I know it's such a strange experience. Um, but yeah, I think maybe it's like cathartic for other people to see someone else's bad deeds get publicly punished, which is not my intention. Don't sue me. I did not want any harm to come to him. I was defending him at first, and yeah, not defending him anymore though.
Yeah, well, yeah, I love what you said too about how as he tried to suppress and didn't wanted this to go away, it just got louder, bigger, the flames grew. I really feel that for you as well. And I think that's how it is because we could pull that statement apart on so many levels. Like, on one hand, that's literally what happened. From like a
Mhm.
psychodynamic perspective, we could look at it and go, yeah, well, he's tried to repress his attachment needs. He's tried to repress his connection and act like I'm fine, I've moved on. It's like, bro, you clearly haven't. And this is one of those things where, people don't understand. Avoidant attachers, when they make the blind side or the discard, as it's called in some circles, you know, they haven't permanently removed that connection to their partner. It looks like they have when they've shut down. It looks like they're hunky dory. They're okay with, cutting this off, but they haven't. And I remember seeing some comments on your some of your videos where people were saying things like, "Oh, but what about him? What about his rights?" I'm like, if he was truly indifferent to this entire situation, he wouldn't be talking right now. And if he was, at least concerned about his actions, he would be talking about being like, right, we need to have some boundaries. I'm happy, obviously, to talk about this within reason, but any further than that, and I need to like back the hell away because this isn't healthy. I know some people can jump in and be like, but what if he doesn't know about boundaries? What if, who cares? The fact of the matter is that I didn't hear any of that based on the accounts that I was seeing. So, to me, it seemed like he was still open to, doing his whole I'm sorry, but story. And it seems to me like, even though he probably feels shame and guilt over what he's done, yeah, good for him. Maybe he should feel that too, because you can't, and I think this is the thing that I really want to stress is you just cannot treat people like that. There are ways to break up with people that honor the sanctity of a relationship. You can't just, I mean, you can if you choose to do this, but if you think that you're not going to have consequences for your actions, that's where you're wrong.
Well, someone's going to have the consequences. And like, um, this is kind of getting, this is a gripe that I wish I could express to him. We both didn't want kids. That was, a major thing that we were compatible on. And I think possibly part of his reason for not wanting kids was not wanting to pass down like the issues that his toxic mom passed down to him. And I wish I could tell him for all he always tried to be a good man. He was very, very into his morals and principles and whatever. I wish I could tell him that, like, okay, well, you might not ever have kids, but you passed that trauma on to me
Yeah.
by not, um, it like you caused chaos and despair and destruction in my life. And then by refusing to engage with me on it or help me pick up the pieces even a little bit, you like shoved the trauma of that away from you, but someone had to pick it up, and it's me. I picked it up. I had to deal with all the feelings he didn't want to deal with. If he had been more willing to engage, it would have been easier on me. It still would have been painful, but I have now absorbed this trauma of the person that I loved deeply and like maturely and seriously was able to just like turn me off like a TV. And that's disturbing. So someone suffers the consequences. And in this case, I did suffer the consequences, but I also made them very loudly known.
Yeah. And I love that you've done that too, because I think, there's a lot to look at with this. I think many people suffer in silence over these experiences and they go hidden away and they don't, allow themselves to talk about this because there's so much shame attached to this as well. Hell, like, under different circumstances, people will just often rationalize away being like, well, maybe they just didn't want me. And it's like, no, it's not as simple as that. Or they'll blame themselves entirely for what happened. But I think when people have sort of moved to a stage where you have, it's like you, my partner, my ex, have made a choice and you have decided to act in a way which is to try and not only blindside me, discard me. You have tried to banish me from your life. You've tried to act like you're hacking me out like very viciously, quite violently too, actually, I'd say. You've tried to violently hack me out of your life to make it out like we were never a thing, and to think that you could just compartmentalize me, probably like how he does with his trauma. And it's probably like how he's been made to feel with his own mum as well, too. I don't know what's going on there, but funnily enough, usually the way people treat us in love is often very similar to the way we would treat it by our caregivers as well, too, or whatever environmental circumstances we had. So, on one hand, I can respect him wanting to protect future generations from that trauma, but exactly as you said, it's like in your moment to be responsible for your trauma, you absolutely failed the assignment. And, you're never going to be the same person off the back of that experience now.
Yeah, I think I more clearly like remembered what I was trying to say earlier with like you don't judge people by how they treat their superiors, you judge them by how they treat their inferiors. Well, in a relationship, maybe you don't judge people by how things are in good times, you judge them by how things are in bad times. And he was such a good man. I looked up to him. He always tried to do the right thing. He was so kind and gentle and giving until this one stressful situation came up. It just changed everything. And yeah, I mean, him, including like his perception was so off and maybe provide some insight into what's going on in some avoiding people's heads. But like the first month after the breakup, we had I had only texted him twice, and then I had to reschedule a planned phone call. After texting him twice in 1 month, where I was like the most depressed I've ever been, just hanging on. And he like responded to me snapping as if I had been harassing him all month. Like, everything you're saying is so one-sided and disrespectful. Like, leave me alone. And when I really I'd only texted him twice. And that like inflating my emotional reaction as if it was like an affront to him, a threat to him, and acting as if I had been the crazy one was just so insulting and violating to me that he then created the situation that he feared and that I got way more emotional and way more upset. Um yeah, it's weird how these things come back around in one way or another.
Yeah, do you know, this is me putting my counselor hat on. Like, I can hear so much stuff going on with that as well too. Like, even from like the times when he was acting like a good man. So to me, my this is stuff that I know from working with a lot of these cases is when we're dealing with people who are on the severe end of avoidant attachment. I'm getting the flavor of someone who's like a dismissive avoidant with this. Like some of the things that come to my head, some of which may or may not resonate, are things like, say, there's issues to do with shame. So this idea of he has to be a good person because deep down he feels like a bad person. So that's one aspect. Two, when it comes to this idea of like growing commitment and intimacy, it seems like that freaks him the hell out. And to me, it sounds like when you were reaching him out post breakup with just like two text messages, you got projection city. He's like, get away from me. You're being disrespectful. You're being needy, whatever words he was using, like you're stalking, you're harassing me, blah, 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 blah. On the surface, you'd probably look at that and go, whoa, what the fuck? Like that seems like an overreaction, or I don't believe I am doing that. It's just two text
Mhm.
messages trying to get clarity or whatever it may be. But you know, it's like in that language, what I hear is I almost feel like there's a 13-year-old inside of him who probably felt emotionally violated by a mum who's feeling like she's controlling, she's too intense, she's too whatever it may be. I feel like there's an emotional incest or an enmeshment vibe that's carried in that language. It's that whole feeling of like, I'm losing my space, I'm losing my freedom. You don't respect my need for autonomy and independence. And he's projecting that onto you in that particular moment. Is this his trauma? Possibly. Does he deserve it? No. But does he have a responsibility for it? Absolutely. And so I really feel like, when we look back at a person like this, it's easy to see them for all the good times when they were really embodying the need to be a good person. But we really have to look at the whole picture because, you know, it's clear that this is a man who has many sides to him, and it's not just the good times.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and also like he was always so calm and gentle and like inexpressive throughout our relationship, which I took to see as like peace and safety. And like he's like a gentle-hearted man. But when this all came around, I realized it wasn't necessarily peace and calm, it was detachment. So I'm like wondering how many more things did he actually have an emotional response to over the course of our many years together that I just had no idea because he was a robot. Like, because in this situation, I was able to see the effect of it and feel the effect of it. But in other situations, I don't know, maybe he just breezed past things that were bothering him and I had no idea at all. But yeah, in this situation, I realized it was detachment, and then that was that same thing that I saw was as safety and peace was became neglect instead. And yeah,
Yeah.
just,
And
looking
again,
back
like,
on things, it all looks so different in hindsight.
oh, it totally does. And like, I mean, even some of the stuff you've shared there again gets my counselor brain rolling because like there's so many things that you could pull out from that as well too. Like his need for peace and detachment. We know a lot of dismissive avoidance thrive on peace because of the instability or neglect they've experienced growing up as well too. For someone who, is robotic like that, we could say, well, they're in the shutdown, they're in the freeze. There's someone who's not able to connect easily with a partner because they're operating in what's called like the high functioning freeze, where their nervous system is numb. They're feeling hopeless. They're practically depressed a lot of the time. And what they're looking for is dopamine hits to try and help them avoid these uncomfortable feelings inside them. They compartmentalize, etc. And I want to take a moment here to say, I know on one hand, when we look at people with attachment injuries, yes, they are traumatized individuals. And we're not here to say, well, anyone with trauma is undateable. Absolutely not. But going back to what I said before, we all have a responsibility for our trauma. And,
Mhm.
if we're going to be this way, wonderful. But we need to also take accountability for our actions. And I think that, as you were saying, like, his way of living was through detachment, peace seeking. He was someone who may not have actually been able to handle emotional upset. These are things that he's going to carry with him in future experiences down the line until he faces himself and works on this. But, it's great that you're actually in your own way holding him accountable through your music because it is that thing where it's like, well, look, you have to understand you don't just do this to someone. And even though for a dismissive avoidant, it's probably the last thing you'd ever want to have happen to you as well, too. But it's like, well, it'd be the same if we were looking at the extreme other end of the spectrum. If someone who's, say, severely anxiously attached has been engaging in stalking behavior, has been engaging in really unreasonable breaches of boundaries where people have been hurt, there's physical abuse and violence. What are we expected to do? Just remain silent while we're being abused? It's like, no, we hold these people accountable because it's like, you don't deserve the trauma that's happened to you. You don't deserve to be like this, but you're also responsible for how you're behaving.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I think I tried to do so much work for him, which in hindsight, it was a failed attempt, but I was so patient with him. I always tried to understand things gently and from his perspective and soften the message. And during the relationship, if there was something we were having trouble communicating on, and then after, and just at a certain point, I had to just give up and be like, I can empathize with the fact that you have trauma, but you're using it to hurt me.
Oh man, even as you were saying that, I could really feel, the frustration and the exhaustion of that as well too, because, I want to make it clear for everyone listening, we are not saying people with a dismissive avoidant or even fearful avoidant attachment style are completely undateable. We're just saying that on an individual level where there's that unwillingness to own our stuff, that's where it's different, and that's case by case. So, going back to what you're saying, like, I have to ask, on one hand, I feel like the education around attachment theory is wonderful because it can help us be like, oh, I can see what's going on now, and there's language to describe it. But how did it feel just getting to that point where you gave up and were like, I can't do it alone?
I would say it was good. It was definitely it was a step forward in my like healing journey. Um, I think like me personally, I wasn't going to be able to move on and let go until I felt like I said everything I needed to say and tried in all the ways I wanted to try until I just got sick of it and I there was nothing left. Like even when I'd go to journal on my own, I'd be like, there's nothing left for me to say. I've said it all.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard place for a lot of people to get to, but I think there is freedom on the other side. And do you know what I love about what you said too is you tried in your own way turning every stone available to you to see if there was a way forward with this. And I know a lot of people actually kind of need that. They almost need to try and do that because psychologically, I've never said to anyone you shouldn't reach out, you shouldn't, I've never in place like restrictions on people in terms of when they want to, try and make it work with these people because I think sometimes you have to go through it and make, mistakes. You have to try and express yourself. And in a way, that allows you to reclaim your sense of voice and choice and agency that was robbed from you as well, too. And it's not coming from ego. It's not that place of like, I need to prove them wrong. I need to like put them in the dirt. No, it's not about doing anything like that. It's more of being like, I am going to do my best to communicate how I'm feeling and struggling with this person to hope that they can come on board with me. But if they're not, there's only so many times I'm going to try before I give up. When we think of human beings and our need for connection, I think we all strive for a degree of significance in people's lives. Some require fame, others just require the simple things in life. And we often think that to be away from people, loneliness is the thing that causes us to feel, like we're going to die, which scientifically it's proven that loneliness can kill. But I think there's a step further that people just don't even appreciate. When you've been banished, particularly by an avoidant partner, where you've been made to feel like you don't matter, you don't exist, you never even mattered at all, I'm erasing that history, that sense of being obliterated, of being erased by someone, just does
Mhm.
something. it's like soul death. It basically makes us feel like we're not even existing on this earth anymore. And no wonder there's that retaliation that comes outside of us that's like, no, I matter. I'm living, I'm alive, and I need you to know you cannot erase me like
Hmm.
that.
I mean, my next song that's coming out, Basket Case, I don't know if by the time we post this, it'll be already be out. It's just about like, yeah, like I'll be the crazy unhinged ex-girlfriend. Like, I think I deserve that. After what you put me through, you don't deserve my restraint. Like, it would have been easier, honestly, if he had just said, I want to like initiate a period of no contact. I'm gonna block you. I don't want you to contact me. Because then at least I would like know. But instead, either barely respond or give me like the coldest, blandest responses, which is so much worse than just nothing because it says like I was just beneath a response. And like experiencing that was just so yeah, you can't erase things. I don't know how they put it on a shelf, but it still existed. So
If anything, this shelf got heavier as time went on. So, you know, you can't just do that to people as well, too. You may try and do that mentally, but unfortunately, in real life, the things you try and compartmentalize have a funny way of escaping the fridge and being like, no, I'm not going to put up with that shit. Um, I also want to make it clear to people listening in, some people might think, oh, well, that's not the behavior of a dismissive avoidant. We're not talking about the average DA. We're talking about those that are on the severe end who engage in this kind of behavior. And, some people might fly and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. Well, we don't know 100% like for sure what the pathology is in all these cases. And frankly, who cares? Like, sometimes we've got to drop the pathologizing and just be like, let's just focus on damn behavior. How has this behavior made us feel? And I think it's quite clear for you the neglect, the obliteration, the erasure, the banishment, and the refusal to just work on it is really bad. And one thing that you said that I thought was really fascinating, and it really describes this trauma bond that was playing out at the end here, was this idea of he kept the communication channels open. So to me, when I hear that, and I get it because I know I do this and everyone does it too. They have to realize it is. You can really see how he's engaging in the drama. Like he's left that door open and it's clearly, him trying to retaliate against his mum through you by keeping that dialogue open. And it's clearly his own way of trying to achieve a degree of, you know, he's trying to create safety over an experience he suffered from many moons ago in having that communication kept open. But here's the thing, even though I can see it, people who are going through it for the first time, like yourself, how the heck are you supposed to know that you're in a drama experience with someone like that too? You're in the thick of pain, you're in so much grief. Logic flies out the door as it always does with trauma. So, it's so easy to be unwittingly playing these experiences where people are reliving these emotional, bad times out in real time. And the damage it does to people is just insane.
yeah, no, he's definitely projected some mommy stuff on me and I'm like, I don't deserve this. Like this box you're putting me in, like I am acting this way because you did this to me. Like my feelings themselves are not problematic. And all I've tried to do with him was was not hate him because I knew that if I was left alone to heal off the back of this, I would end up hating him. Like, how could you not? He brought me out to Texas and dumped me 30 days later. Um, and just like cold without a trace. I didn't want to hate him. I wanted to remain friends with him. I didn't want to be angry. People have said like, oh, like forgiveness is for you and carrying around anger is you're the one experiencing the anger and whatever. But every time I try to understand things from his perspective or try to forgive him, it gives me this spark of like, oh, I want to express that. And then I remember what's going to happen if I try to reach out to him, even if it's the most understanding, bend over backwards kind of way. No matter how much work I do, he's still going to dismiss and reject me again. And then I just hate him all over again. So I don't know. It sucks. That's like where I'm at. I mean, I'm coming up on 7 months and I'm looking forward to the day where it's just a distant memory. it's weird to think that if one thing had gone differently, I could still be there. And like it really does feel like it was just the luck of the draw that day that brought him down that path. Because before then, he was aware of his avoidant attachment and down to like work on it, even though attaching to someone was uncomfortable. Like there is a future where we could have been together forever, not without challenges, but got to accept it and move on and try to learn some lessons and take some litmus tests earlier on in the relationship next time. Not that it will be easy, because Lord knows he did not present as avoidant at all until well into the relationship, but I'll try.
A story as old as time. I know a lot of people often say that. They're like, oh, they came across as so secure. I'm like, a lot of them do. A lot of them, present that way. And look, for a bit of compassion to him, I'd say, this is from me, you don't have to share it, is I'd say, hey, I'm sure if we look back at this, there have probably been some stellar moments that you had with your ex. Like there would have been some absolutely phenomenal moments where you're like, yep, he was the love of my life in these particular moments, and I will never forget those great moments. And he also decided to replay his trauma with me, so I'm not really grateful for that. It's like two things can be true at once, and it's hard to put those two things together. But yeah, I think this is a great place to round out on too. So I just want to say, Gillian Sprightly, thank you so much for sharing your experience with this because I'm really grateful for you. Not only as a counselor who's in this space of helping people recover through these experiences, but just, as an audience member of yours as well, for actually just talking about it because I feel like there, parts of me were really quite excited watching the content that's just come out post breakup that have really allowed, you the freedom to really lean into those big emotions off the back of it. And yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing you've been able to turn, a lot of that pain into this glorious inferno.
Thank you. That's really great to hear. And I can't put to words how like honored and like imposter syndrome I feel whenever someone sends me a message saying like my videos have helped them through their breakup. I'm like, what? Seriously? Me? Why? But yeah, I think people shouldn't be afraid to share their grief. It's ugly and it always is. It's just that everyone hides, so that's why you don't see it all the time. And yeah, so it's been great to come on here and talk to you about it. Big fan. You helped me through my breakup so much. And yeah, hopefully I, can pay it forward.
Oh, you have just by being here. So to be honest, I'm like, no, I really appreciate your presence. Thank you. And I'm excited to see what other, amazing works of art you produce off the back of this too, because I'm confident it's probably just it's gonna grow and become more amazing off the back of this.